Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our 2026 High Level Political Forum side event entitled Youth Voices for a Sustainable Future Experiences, Perspectives, and Recommendations on SDGs 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. My name is Annika, and I am a student at the University of Sydney and an intern with the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary Loretto Generalette NGO to the United Nations. Before we begin today's program, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. We ask that you keep yourself muted throughout the event. Please feel free to introduce yourself and ask questions using the chat function below. Today we have Spanish interpretation available. To enable interpretation, please click on the interpretation button on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select your language. If you are using Spanish interpretation, we ask you to kindly rename yourself on your Zoom screen and add an SP to the end of your name. This will allow us to more easily assign you to a breakout room with other Spanish speakers later in the program. We also wish to acknowledge that this is a safe space for youth to express their views and their experiences. We invite you to enter into this space with an attitude of open and non-judgmental listening. Thank you. It is our custom to formally begin events by acknowledging the land upon which we are gathering, even when we gather virtually. As you introduce yourselves in the chat, I invite you to also name where you are joining from and to include the Indigenous territory if you know it. Let us take a moment now to acknowledge and honour the power of the sun, wind, and the rain that nurtures life on earth, the spirit of the fields, the forests and mountains, and oceans and rivers, and all that lives within. The wisdom of our ancestors, the Indigenous peoples, and the original inhabitants of the land on which we are on. In particular, we wish to acknowledge the land upon which the United Nations headquarters stands, politically designated as New York City, the homeland of the Lenape people who were violently displaced as a result of European settler colonialism over the course of 400 years. The Lenape are a diasporic people that remain closely connected with this land and are its rightful stewards. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban Native American Indigenous populations in the United States. Let us affirm our desire for right relations with all Indigenous peoples, built on rights, respect, and reciprocity, as we work toward the full implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. This side event is a collaborative effort of many partners: the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary Loretto Generalette, Maryknoll Sisters of St. Dominic, the Grail, Congregation Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd, Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, the Dominican Leadership Conference, Justice Coalition of Religious, along with the Mary Ward Centre and CJ Spain JPIC office. Our partners are committed to amplifying the voices of youth in UN spaces as we work toward the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. I would now like to introduce our moderator for this event. Charlotte is the representative for Gender Equality and Youth for the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd, an NGO with special consultative status to the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. Based in New York, Charlotte contributes to girls' education, grassroots representation, and advocacy through her work in capacity building trainings, research, and information sharing throughout the Good Shepherd Network.
Thank you so much, Annika. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome. Whether you're joining us from somewhere on site at the United Nations or from your home, office, or community center somewhere across the globe, I'm so glad you're here. Your presence today confirms that youth voices belong at the global policy table, starting with this critical conversation. My name is Charlotte, and I'm honored to serve as your moderator for today's event, Youth Voices for a Sustainable Future, an official side event of the 2026 High Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. We are 4 years from the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda deadline. I don't need to remind many of you that it's just 4 years now. This carries greater weight to consider that the 15 years of the development agenda encompasses a majority of our lifetime as youth. And development targets are visible all around us. It is the water we drink, the energy that powers our schools and hospitals, the cities we're growing up in and growing into. The SDGs are not abstract illusions, but the conditions of our daily lives. As we approach this deadline, it is crucial that progress towards these goals is tangible. We are not here to share our realities and struggles and wait for others to respond. These efforts require collaboration with youth as co-creators, as innovators, as a generation that has never known a world without the internet, without climate crisis, without the knowledge that the challenges we face are global, and so too must be our solutions. Young people, 1.8 billion of us, aged 10 to 24, are already doing this work. In rural communities, young people are designing low-cost water filtration systems and mapping water access gaps that governments haven't yet charted. In rapidly urbanizing cities, youth-led collectives are campaigning to implement affordable, sustainable housing. In places experiencing energy poverty, young entrepreneurs are building solar microgrids and bringing power into communities. Today, we're going to hear from very impressive leaders from the Philippines, Ukraine and Spain, Australia and India, Zimbabwe and beyond, who are living at the intersection of SDGs 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. Clean water, affordable energy, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities, and the partnerships that make all of it possible. They will not only share the challenges their communities face, they will bring ideas, recommendations, and a call to action for every policymaker, UN agency representative, and civil society partner in this space. Now it is time for the world's institutions to match the energy, creativity, and commitment to SDG progress displayed by young people with the access, the resources, and the genuine partnership we need to achieve what is necessary. The 2026 HLPF theme calls for action that is transformative, equitable, innovative, and coordinated. And I can't think of a better description of what young people are bringing to this moment. We will now move into our panel discussion, followed by time for breakout room conversations, which I really encourage you all to engage with fully before our closing call to action. But first, to every young person with us now, and to every young person who could not be here today, this space is for you. Your experiences matter, your recommendations matter, and our generation will not be talked about in the abstract today. We will speak for ourselves. So welcome to Youth Voices for a Sustainable Future. It is my pleasure to first introduce the remarkable young leaders who will be guiding our conversation today. Our panel of speakers represent diverse voices from around the world. They will speak about their experiences and perspectives on sustainable infrastructure and community resilience in climate vulnerable regions, to energy access, innovation, and rebuilding for a sustainable future in the face of challenges, including in conflict areas. They'll bring forward the collective desires of the generation to build a world where all young people can thrive and be confident in their future. Together, these 5 voices represent the geographic diversity, the depth of experience, and the bold ambition that this moment demands. Please join me in welcoming our panel. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Christine is a second-year Bachelor of Arts in Global Affairs and Diplomacy student at Miriam College in Quezon City, Philippines. She serves as the internal vice president of the School of Arts, Sciences, and Education. A dedicated student leader, she has held various leadership positions throughout her academic journey. Welcome, Christine. The floor is yours.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Charlotte. And good day, esteemed guests and fellow youth leaders. My name is Christine, a second-year college student from the Philippines. Before I am a leader, a youth advocate, and many more identities, I am simply a student who commutes to school. I wake up before the sun rises, anticipating that a journey that should take an hour will take twice or even thrice as long. I wait in long queues for public utility vehicles, or PUVs, elbow my way into overcrowded trains, and spend hours of my life in draining, stressful traffic. Before I've even sat down in class to learn, I am already physically and mentally exhausted. This is the reality of the average Filipino commuter. When we discuss SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, advanced infrastructure often comes to mind. But building sustainable cities is ultimately about building spaces for people. However, if the journey to these spaces is cramped, congested, and inefficient, the goal is not truly manifested into actual outcomes. In the Philippines, substandard public transportation remains a great hindrance to this goal. According to the Philippine Development Plan, poor mobility in the country is largely attributed to the lack of public utility vehicles that meet demand. And according to the 2025 TomTom Traffic Index, the Philippines ranked first as the most congested in Asia and second globally with a congestion rate of 45%. And in 2024, Manila ranked 60th in urban mobility readiness among 65 cities around the world with the worst public transit systems. For many students like myself from lower middle class families that do not own a private vehicle, commuting is our only means of transportation, no matter how cramped, tiring, and undignified it can be. Our only option becomes a test of endurance rather than a service efficiently delivered. Despite these challenges, there have been multiple initiatives to improve public transportation. The introduction of beep cards, which are stored value cards for train tickets with discounts for students, senior citizens, and persons with disabilities, has made commuting more convenient by reducing long queues. Yet, convenience alone cannot solve congestion. If there are simply not enough trains, buses, or public utility vehicles to meet demand, commuters will continue spending hours waiting and traveling in overcrowded systems. So, to fulfill SDG 11 is to make it a mission for our government to make public transportation truly for the public. Local policymakers and governments worldwide now hold a major responsibility to enact this mission. Its first steps should begin with prioritizing reliable public transportation through modern transport technology, increasing the number of public utility vehicles, allocating sufficient budgets, expanding train systems, and investing in electric vehicles to reduce emissions while improving passenger comfort. These improvements should also be supported by sustainable infrastructure and reliable roads. This modernization must also consider the workers and drivers who rely on traditional public transportation for a living. The Philippines' most popular public transport is the jeepney. It is a colorful vehicle that is integral to our identity and provides affordable transportation for millions. While some traditional jeepneys are aging and contribute a lot to emissions, recent modernization efforts have led to a massive jeepney phase out that has left many drivers struggling with insufficient financial assistance, higher operating costs, and complicated paperwork. These jeepneys are integral parts of our identity as Filipinos, a factor that is not disposable just for the sake of modernization. However, both progress and preservation can exist at once. Jeepney drivers are the backbone of Philippine transport, and as such, they should be included in legislative and planning processes. And the government should ensure that the workers themselves do not bear the costs. By simplifying the transition process and providing equitable financial assistance, we can preserve our culture while creating a transport system that is efficient, just, and inclusive. This way, public transportation is not just improved for the people in the passenger seats, but also for those who operate the steering wheel. And lastly, to achieve meaningful progress in public transportation, the youth must be at the center of planning, especially on the topics of affordability and accessibility. As digital natives, we can help develop user-friendly applications with centralized information on routes, schedules, online ticketing, and real-time congestion updates. We can also contribute innovative ideas for cycling infrastructure, pedestrian-friendly spaces, and a stronger public transit connections because students and young professionals experience these commuting realities daily. With more young people in the driver's seat of advancement, a brighter future for public transportation is imminent. Filipinos and communities worldwide deserve a public transport system that works with them, not against them. Students deserve to pursue their education without worrying about exhausting commutes. Transport workers deserve to be included in the systems they help sustain. And nations deserve to have a secure and accessible journey to their destinations. When these goals are realized, SDG 11 becomes more than an aspiration, it becomes a reality that improves the lives of all communities. That is all, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that excellent presentation and sharing your experience of SDG 11 as it connects to the transportation system in the Philippines. You've clearly displayed that we need adequate investment in infrastructure. And for a truly just and equitable modernization, those most affected in decision making need to be included. So thank you. I would now like to invite our next speakers. Claire and Daksha will co-present the findings of a global youth project on the SDGs undertaken by the IBVM Loreto NGO. Claire is an Australian intern at the IBVM Loreto NGO. She is a second-year student at the University of Melbourne, studying a Bachelor of Arts with a major in French Studies. She also has a keen interest in and takes subjects in politics, communications, and other languages, including Latin and Spanish. Daksha is also an IBVM Loreto NGO intern who is currently pursuing a degree in English at Miranda House, University of Delhi. She's been actively involved in civil society advocacy since 2022 and has been a part of JPIC and Friends of Mary Ward in high school, which sparked her interest in the NGO's work. She's deeply passionate about climate justice, women's and girls' rights, and refugee rights, among other global concerns. Welcome, Claire and Daksha. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Today, Daksha and I are honoured to join you and are proud to present a report brought together by Sister Sarah and interns like us working with her at the IBVM CJ NGO at the UN. Our youth report, Youth Voices for Sustainable Development, a Global Call to Action, was developed to bring to light the experiences, perspectives, and recommendations of young people in relation to Sustainable Development Goals 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17, which will be specifically reviewed at this year's HLPF. The report draws on the lived experiences of 102 young people aged 15 to 24 from Australia, Canada, England, India, and Nepal. Their insights were gathered through a youth-led conversation circle methodology. During these facilitated discussions, young people shared of their experiences, challenges, and ideas for change in relation to these SDGs. Across countries and SDGs, common themes were identified. These included the inequality between rural and urban living areas, affecting access to water, energy, transport, digital connectivity, and community infrastructure. Affordability and cost of living, as well as AI's global impact, although experienced differently between countries, was also concerning to young people. Other concerns centered around young people and women being groups frequently overlooked in SDG progress, as their voices are often diminished globally, especially under the weight of sexism and the burdens of stereotypical female roles. Overall, this report shows youth voices are thought-provoking and important to be heard in the UN deliberations, such as at this HLPF.
Across 5 countries, several major concerns linked to SDG 6, that is, clean water and sanitation, were found to be shared, although inequalities were quite stark. Firstly, there was a notable divide in access to clean water and sanitation. This ranges from an urban-rural divide, as observed in Australia and Nepal, to an urban gated community, urban slum divide in countries like India. Secondly, indigenous communities were disproportionately impacted in countries such as Canada and Australia. Similarly, gender was seen to be a dividing factor, manifesting as period poverty, then women being physically burdened with fetching water, and the lack of public toilets. A rather new and emerging concern was AI data center water usage, as observed by participants from India as well as England. There were stark differences in the immediacy of the crisis across countries. Participants from India and Nepal were found to be severely affected themselves, while Australian and Canadian participants mostly spoke of the crisis as occurring in other parts of their countries, not directly impacting them. The key recommendation was for investments to be made in the infrastructure to supply and treat water, wastewater, and sewage, and to address water pollution and water shortage.
On to SDG 7. Across the conversation circles, participants greatly supported a need to transition to clean energy, but highlighted a significant gap between ambition and reality. In Australia, Canada, and England, participants described how rising living costs can make affording sustainable choices and energy sources unrealistic. In India and Nepal, energy insecurity was more prominent, with frequent power cuts disrupting daily life, education, and community participation. Social barriers towards renewable energy were seen through the economic dependence of nations such as Australia on the fossil fuel industry, through misinformation on this topic, through fossil fuel technologies dominating transport and trade mechanisms, as well as concerns about the fairness of energy transition for regional communities such as mining towns. Solar energy's potential for generating renewable energy, particularly in countries such as India with abundant sunlight and Australia with vast desert space, was also discussed. Barriers to citizens prioritising solar energy included high installation costs, limited battery storage, and government or society stigma around renewable energy. One key recommendation out of many drawn from these conversation circles towards SDG 7 included increasing investment and government subsidies in renewable energy forms like solar and battery storage, as well as apprenticeship programs tied to solar, wind, and EV infrastructure to introduce new jobs for industries being replaced by renewables.
With SDG 9, that is industry, innovation, and infrastructure, the most consistent concern was digital connectivity, which was raised across England, India, Nepal, and parts of Australia as impacting educational and opportunities, especially during the pandemic. Once again, the role of under-regulated AI was highlighted here. Public transport was brought up by several participants as well. Australian participants criticized the car-centric design of outer suburban areas, while participants from India and Nepal pointed out poorly constructed roads and inefficient public transport facilities. Youth from Nepal even going so far as to identify it as a cause for Gen Z's political uprising in the country. As with many other SDGs, here too, a divide was observed. Australian and English participants discussed improving existing infrastructure, while participants from India and Nepal described the situation as needing building from scratch. English participants also brought up the responsibility of wealthier nations in funding infrastructural development in lower income countries, especially in the light of the climate crisis. A key recommendation was for investments to be made in affordable housing initiatives and sustainable urban development.
Now to SDG 11. Through discussions on SDG 11, youth participants shared concerns that many communities are not being designed with young people's well-being, safety, and future opportunities in mind. Housing affordability and rising living costs were major concerns, particularly in Canada, Australia, and England. In the Australian context, it was noted that in new housing estates being created that are more affordable but not necessarily sustainably planned out, creating car dependency and lacking green spaces, job opportunities, and shops. Across all countries, public transport emerged as a critical issue. Young people highlighted problems with affordability, reliability, accessibility, and safety, particularly for young women and young people generally travelling to education or employment in various international transport networks. For example, participants in Nepal noted that unlit streets and unreliable transport can put women at greater risks. Additionally, the inequality between the rural and urban living areas previously mentioned impacts SDG 11. In India and Nepal, concerns focused on poor road conditions, inadequate public infrastructure, and unequal access to basic services. Australian participants noted how some of these factors affect rural communities more, causing cars to dominate. This flows back to SDG 7 and fossil fuel dependence. One of the many recommendations for SDG 11 brought from these conversation circles was to create more formal spaces for youth participation in sustainability planning and policy development. This planning should include stricter building planning regulations for greener, more accessible, and renewable energy dependent cities.
Youth from across countries identified three major concerns. That is the gap between commitment and action, which manifests as misaligned governmental policies and priorities in funding and implementation gaps. Youth exclusion from decision making, most notably in Nepal, but also in other countries such as India, and the role of international institutions where concerns regarding the United Nations Authority were shared by Australian participants, and the lack of knowledge among most citizens about the SDG framework was highlighted in Nepal. All in all, participants highlighted a need for a change in the way that partnership is approached, from utilizing young people's potential to reassessing governmental and intergovernmental priorities vis-a-vis community involvement and fulfillment of necessities. The ultimate message that participants across countries and social contexts agreed on was that the 2030 agenda cannot be achieved unilaterally. To safeguard future generations while improving lives today, government, society, international organizations, and especially young people must work collaboratively and with urgency to build a sustainable, more equitable world. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire and Daksha, for sharing such a fascinating study. You've highlighted some really interesting and valuable comparisons between youth perspectives, and sharing those really clear-cut recommendations that display what priorities are across a number of countries. You've also reiterated the pressing need to include youth in the work to achieve SDGs through collaboration and partnership. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm now happy to welcome our next panelist. Jasmine is a 17-year-old student from Chennai, India. She is engaged in advocacy across a number of fields, specifically for youth and sports, climate justice, and environmental sustainability in the digital era. Jasmine has engaged in numerous UN Commission on the Status of Women sessions across multiple strategic and advocacy roles, including as panelists for events on girls' empowerment, technology, and sustainability, and as a member of the Girls' Statement Writing Core Group. Welcome, Jasmine. You have the floor.
Thank you, Charlotte. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Greetings from Chennai, India. My name is Jasmine, and I'm incredibly proud to represent Good Shepherd. As a student athlete, I spend a lot of my time outdoors. Because of that, the environment isn't an abstract topic to me. It's my everyday reality. It connects perfectly to what Pope Francis calls integral ecology in Laudato Si, the simple truth that everything is connected. We cannot separate the health of our planet from our health, our education, or our joy. And as the Pope cautions us in Laudato Deum, this climate crisis is right here, knocking on our doors, and the youth are bearing the heaviest weight. When we talk about the SDGs under review today, we aren't just talking about checkboxes on a UN document. We are talking about our daily survival, our mental peace, and our right to a real childhood. To understand what is actually happening to young people on the ground, my sister Anne Rose and I launched a nationwide survey called Outdoors and Youth. We heard from over 260 young people, predominantly school and college students across the states of India. Almost every single person said the same thing. 92.9% have noticed drastic changes in our weather patterns over the past 5 years. Summers are longer, heat waves are brutal, and 90.6% specifically reported experiencing hotter temperatures. Our data shows that environmental issues are actively disrupting our daily lives. First, on water and energy. 52.3% of our respondents told us that clean drinking water is either sometimes unavailable, unsafe, or frequently unsafe to drink. Meanwhile, 80.8% said that power cuts affect their ability to study or stay healthy, with nearly 1 in 5 saying it happens often during these severe heat waves. Second, the physical toll. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's making us sick. When asked how pollution and climate change affects us, over 81% of the youth reported facing a direct physical impact, dealing with severe or moderate symptoms like chronic coughing, asthma flare-ups, eye irritation, and heat exhaustion. When we map our survey answers against India's official National Air Quality Index, the connection is undeniable. In Delhi, which is officially ranked as the most polluted capital in the world, the youth who filled out our form reported the highest rates of health disruptions and school closures. But even in the coastal, lower AQI states like Tamil Nadu or Goa, youth aren't spared. Instead of smog, we are reporting severe heat exhaustion and deep anxiety over unpredictable floods. A recent report by The Guardian, published in June 2026, just last month, highlighted the real gravity of this situation. Schools across half of India's 28 states are being forced to shut down for weeks or even months due to extreme heat waves and toxic pollution. Education moves online, creating massive inequality for students who lack stable internet and leaving young people trapped indoors for massive chunks of the year. As an athlete, the most heartbreaking thing to see in our survey relates to our fundamental right to safe, inclusive, and open green public spaces. Nearly every young person who filled out our form said that outdoor play, sports, and time outside are absolutely essential or moderately important to their mental and physical health. Yet, the climate crisis is actively stealing those spaces from us. 89.9% of youth stated that air pollution, extreme heat, or climate damage has outright prevented them from playing sports, exercising, or going outside, either frequently or occasionally. When we are forced to cut our activities short and lock ourselves indoors, we don't just sit there quietly. 86.1% of youth reported feeling deeply frustrated, stressed, angry, or disappointed and sad. Furthermore, 78.9% reported a severe to moderate social or emotional impact, meaning they are missing school, isolated from friends, feeling trapped indoors, and watching their team sports get cancelled. Good Shepherd position papers always remind us that true progress must protect human dignity. Guided by global partnerships, the over 260 youth from our study have a very clear, very simple message for our leaders. Please, can you? Thank you. We are asking for three things based on what our respondents voted as most urgent. 1. Protect our right to play. Clean up the air and water around our schools and build more green public spaces, parks, and sports complexes designed for our new climate reality. 2. Build resilient infrastructure. Shutdowns are just a temporary fix. Invest in public transport and clean, eco-friendly infrastructure so our education isn't paused every time the temperature spikes. 3. Partner with youth. Work with us. Our peers suggested that youth and children are involved directly in environmental policy and planning decisions so that we can build solutions together. The youth of India are not just waiting for a sustainable future. We are fighting for it. We are asking UN leaders and our governments to do their part so that we can simply breathe, study, play, and thrive. Let's make a world where the air is clear, the water is safe, and the youth are healthy and happy. I take this opportunity to thank all those who participated in the survey. Alone we are strong, but together we are stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, for sharing such thorough research and evaluation. You really brought these data points to life, revealing, as you said, how climate change is actively stealing things like education, play, and time outside, but then also the compounding effects and intersecting issues, especially access to internet and the need for comprehensive mental health support. But your three recommendations make it clear what needs to change. So hopefully it's just as easy as that. I would now like to introduce our next speakers. Vitalina and Laura, representing the Congregation of Jesus JPIC office in Spain. Vitalina is a Ukrainian youth delegate to the UN from 2025 to 2026, who specializes in security, defense, and humanitarian demining. For over 5 years, she has been engaged in international advocacy, actively cooperating with international media outlets in Ukrainian, English, and Spanish. As head of the student union at VN Kharkiv National University, Vitalina led a team that developed and implemented humanitarian policy response to the Russian full-scale invasion. Laura holds a degree in business and communication and currently serves as the UN Youth Representative for the IBVM Loreto NGO based in Spain. Deeply committed to youth empowerment, she leads key initiatives like the Generación 2030 in Spain and 2030 Generation in Europe, providing training on the SDGs, encouraging youth to speak about the 2030 agenda. Thank you so much for being here today. You have the floor.
Well, hello everyone. It is a true privilege to speak here at this HLPF site event. My intervention today is grounded in the collaborative work of 5 young leaders from across Europe and the world: Emanuele from Italy, Vitalina from Ukraine, Lily from Germany, Lucy from Australia, and I'm Laura from Spain. I want to thank them all because I think they are all here. We came together to look beyond cold theoretical statistics and discuss personally, through a young lens, the actual lived realities and challenges of the SDGs in our respective countries. I will just comment on this work from a general perspective, while Vitalina will be centered in what's happening in the Ukraine. About the SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, the climate change is visibly shifting water availability across all regions. Germany, Spain, and Italy report extreme summer droughts, alternating with flash flooding that has caught local emergency infrastructures off guard. Australia faces identical climate-driving strains, forcing massive state investments into desalination and water trading. While tap water is generally high quality and affordable across metropolitan Europe and Australia, structural inequalities still persist. Then about SDG 7, affordable, clean and energy, we came to investigate that low-income households in Germany spend up to 10 to 15% of their budget on electricity, while in Italy, for example, energy and housing costs combined swallow over 60% of an average worker incomes. In Australia, vulnerable households spend up to 10% of disposable income in utilities. Going on about the SDG 9, industry innovation and infrastructure, the traditional non-eco-friendly building materials still dominate to build houses. In Spain and Australia, older housing stocks lacks proper thermal isolation, so they make home notoriously hot in summer and cold in winter. However, green building regulations are growing, and major European cities like Madrid or Pavia are successfully implementing low-emission zones, little by little, and electric bike networks. Then, lastly, about the SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, the acute housing crisis in Spain is really hard because the average rent consumes nearly 99% of a young person's month salary, forcing 75% of youth under 34 to live with their parents and delaying independence to an average of 30. In Germany and in Italy, poverty values force youth also to stay indefinitely in shared flats. Australia mirrors this exact affordability crisis, with property values considered among the most expensive in the developed world. This, of course, draws a direct line between housing insecurity and the demographic decline. Now Vitalina will speak, highlighting the situation of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be part of this HPLF side event, especially as a former Ukrainian youth delegate to the United Nations. I will be sharing the same perspective on the same SDGs. However, let's say reporting from the ground, as I'm now based in Kiev, Ukraine. So as for SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, only 68% of our population has active and stable connection to a centralized water grid. And the situation is specifically very severe and difficult in the Ukrainian territories that are temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation, because people unfortunately have to live with the conditions there. A lot of them do not have stable access to water. But even when we talk about the territories that are under government-controlled areas in Ukraine, because for the last, especially since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, they have been targeting a lot of our water infrastructure, and even myself living in the capital of Ukraine, sometimes I don't have a stable access to water depending after attacks. But it's important to mention that all our government structure and our, let's say, utilities facilities are trying to be adapted as much as possible to renew the water supply. As to SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, it's also a really interesting perspective when we talk about it from the country at war, because our energy, especially comparing to some European prices, is quite affordable, even though still to the economic difficulties that Ukraine now is facing, a lot of families and especially young people, bills are still high. But again, comparing to a lot of other, let's say, Western countries, not only in Europe, the prices are quite decent. However, again, since 2022, Russian Federation has been targeting our energy infrastructure, and that is why there is not a single household in Ukraine that had a stable energy connection for the last 5 years. And this is very difficult, because when you think about electricity and energy, we as young people, what can we think about? Okay, of course it's light, of course it's Wi-Fi. I mean, maybe it will be difficult to reach something on social media, even though connectivity is extremely important. But when we talk about the context of Ukraine, energy a lot of times also means heating. And in Ukraine, where our energies can go down like around 22% below 0 Celsius. It's a really cold weather in Fahrenheit. I cannot calculate right now in my mind, but it's a really cold weather. Being without heating is very difficult, and especially for actually I cannot say for everyone, for young people, for elderly people, for people with children, everyone is struggling. So this is really important to understand this perspective on SDG 7 when we talk about from a country of war. SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. Again, a lot due to the war, Russia's war in Ukraine, a lot of our infrastructure has been completely demolished or slightly or just targeted. That's why we need a lot of infrastructure rebuilding right now. And I like to say this phrase that Ukraine has to be inclusive these days. We don't have other option. So when we talk about rebuilding our different buildings, infrastructure, facilities, and things like that, we are trying to make them more inclusive. They were, and I'm proud to say that a lot of young people are actually driving these initiatives to make sure that these new facilities are being inclusive to people with different needs. And on the last SDG that we are covering today, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, here the same. I would, bring back to the reality. A lot of co-panelists have been mentioning that especially young people are facing a real renting crisis a lot around the world. And last year, when I was conducting youth consultations in very different regions across Ukraine, and one of the key aspects when I asked young people what what are your problems? What do you want me to, to tell abroad, what messages to communicate? And of course, security concerns was number one priority. Things about what we don't know what will be in the future, planning, but also renting problem was, let's say, top 5 definitely. So the prices are increasing in Ukraine as well. And I think on SDG 11, this will be the only SDG from what we discussed that will be actually really similar problems that we face with other co-panelists mentioned here. But to sum up, I want to highlight one word is resilience, that despite water and energy disruptions that are very consistently being conducted by the Russian Federation in Ukraine, and Ukraine continues to adapt. We are adapting every day to new reality. We are preparing for the next winter. We are preparing for we are rebuilding our infrastructure facilities that were completely demolished. So Ukraine is resilient, and young people are a very important part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you both for such an impressive presentation. You really embodied the fact that SDGs can't just remain on paper when it comes to progress. That was such an informative breakdown highlighting youth-specific and extremely timely challenges. So thank you for that update. I would now like to introduce our final panelist, Jaden, who is joining us from Zimbabwe. Jaden is a spoken word artist and poet, junior mayor, and human rights advocate. She loves reading and using storytelling to understand and express real issues affecting young people in her community. She has spoken at different forums, including Model United Nations, and on topics like human rights, culture, and technology, using her spoken word and public speaking as a way of engaging with people. Welcome, Jaden. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for having me here. Honored guests, leaders, ladies, and gentlemen. I stand before you today representing the Republic of Zimbabwe and her commitment to Sustainable Development Goal number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. I remember driving home from school in 2015 with my father. Now, I don't remember much about the conversations we had because my concentration was on the fact that the road was bad. My father wasn't driving a car. It seemed as if he was auditioning for Formula One, left, right, and left again. The funny thing is, every afternoon we fought the same battle. Fast forward to today, I drive along that same road. The potholes that once dictated our journey have disappeared. The road that was once dilapidated has been reconstructed. The traffic flows. The journey that once tested my patience now reminds me of my country's progress. And that's when it struck me. Infrastructure doesn't simply change roads. It is a structure that changes stories and brings about economic growth. Because every kilometer rehabilitated is a step closer to a desired destination. It means another entrepreneur refusing to let distance become destiny. Zimbabwe is still developing. She is still in her prime. So don't judge her by today's skyline. Give her tomorrow's time. Because no masterpiece apologizes for looking like a construction site, because the vision will soon be in sight. Because what you get is not what meets the eye. Today, Zimbabwe is laying more than asphalt. She is laying ambition. The recently completed Jobabless interchange is not merely an interchange. It is an exchange of congestion for connection, an exchange of delays for development, an exchange of frustration and beyond border post is proving that infrastructure doesn't merely connect places, it connects possibilities. Bridge the gap for investment. I see confidence. Some see pillars, I see possibility. The World Bank describes infrastructure as the backbone of economic growth. Zimbabwe heard that literally, but even when her backbone broke in 2008, Zimbabwe chose to crawl until she could stand. Every bridge restored strengthened our backbone. Every highway rehabilitated came from a point of dedication. Every investment in infrastructure tells the world that Zimbabwe is preparing not to merely move people, but to move an entire economy. And an economy on the move never stands still. It attracts investments, it creates employment, it inspires development. Zimbabwe's economy is projected to grow by around 6%, not merely a rise in a graph, but a reason to grasp new possibilities, because growth isn't simply about climbing a chart. It's about giving every citizen a stronger start. And the film doesn't stop where the tarmac ends. That's exactly where opportunity extends. Across Zimbabwe, service stations have become a sensation. Yesterday, they sold us fuel. Today, they fuel commerce, they fuel careers, they fuel communities. Food courts buzz with families. Small businesses welcome customers. Young entrepreneurs that discover that where people stop, opportunity doesn't. Yesterday, we filled our tanks. Today, we're fulfilling our dreams. Zimbabwe means house or stone. Yet perhaps our greatest story isn't the stone beneath our feet, but the future we choose to build upon it. We sit on one of the world's hard rock lithium deposits, that very mineral powering electric vehicles, renewable energy, and the green economy of tomorrow. Think about that. The world is charging its future using minerals from Zimbabwean soil. But Zimbabwe has made a powerful decision. We are no longer content with exporting tomorrow, and that's why we have put this restriction. By restricting the export of all lithium ore, encouraging local processing, we are choosing value for volume, creation of factories from the way that Zimbabwe has this. In what a nation extracts. Make parents proud. Zucker is determined to become Zimbabwe's own Zuckerberg, proving that your should never postpone your purpose. The young girl from Caillou had darkness and doesn't curse it. She converts it. She doesn't wait for the future. She creates it. It's every young person consume technology, but dream of producing it. We download ideas, but upload solutions. Because Zimbabwe's richest mine has never been beneath our feet. It resides in the young minds who refuse to let their backgrounds define the rest of their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Vision 2030 isn't just a document. It is an awakening reality. You see it in roads that are being built. You see it in airports that are being modernized. You see it in growing innovation ecosystems. You see it in young people who no longer ask, where can I find a job? But what problem is the Zimbabwe I know? A Zimbabwe that refuses to be defined by yesterday's challenges. A Zimbabwe determined to build tomorrow. A Zimbabwe where roads don't simply shorten journeys, they shorten the distance between dreams and destiny. Where minerals don't merely leave the ground, they lift a nation. Where innovation isn't a privilege for the few, but a possibility for the many. A Zimbabwe proving that sustainable development is not something we wait for, it is something we work for. Brick by brick, bridge by bridge, dream by dream. Until so my father down time to go, let's see in Zimbabwe forward. Because I be talking about a road. Today I ended talking about a destination that changes a nation. And when Zimbabwe finally arrives, the world will realize she was never lost. She was simply under construction. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaden. That was really fantastic. I apologize for those connectivity issues, but as Sarah said, hopefully we'll be able to share out a copy of your speech because having heard it in our event rehearsal, I know there's not a single word that should be missed in that. So hopefully everyone will be able to read it after our event is over. That wraps up our panel. We're now going to move into our small group breakout rooms for an intergenerational conversation. Each group will be led by a youth facilitator who will pose 3 questions to you. These questions are on the slide on your screen. All Spanish-speaking attendees will be matched with Spanish-speaking facilitators. So now I ask you to please make sure you have SP by your name if you would like to be part of the Spanish group. So each group will have about 20 minutes for this conversation. We invite you to begin with a round of introductions. You can share your name and where you're joining from, and then we will invite deeper reflection on the theme of our event. So just to read out these questions real quick, we'll go over what surprised you or prompted an insight, resonates with you from the presentations, what your experience of the SDGs under review has been, and then what concrete commitments can your organization or government make to include youth in its work on the SDGs, including utilizing existing partnerships. So I think once the breakout rooms are ready, Sarah will open them up, and all you have to do is click join the breakout room on your screen, and then we will come back in about 20 minutes for our facilitators to share your key takeaways.
Thanks, Charlotte. I think the rooms are still being made, so we'll just wait a moment.
Great, thank you. And I guess I'll just remind again, if you would like to be in the Spanish-speaking room, please have SP next to your name. Thank you.
Sorry, just another minute. And just to confirm our Spanish-speaking youth facilitators, we have Mario, we have Eugenia, and we have Laura. Okay. Teresa, do you have an update on the rooms?
Yep, I'm working on getting them sorted.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Teresa. It looks like most people have gone into the rooms.
If anyone is struggling to join your breakout room, please send us a message in the chat box and we can help direct you to the room.
Which is that green spaces make us feel better. And we do appreciate when our cities or our school have those spaces because they are also kind of climate shelters since everything is colder around it. Another thing that Cecilia mentioned, for instance, and I think is very interesting, is how young people are so they decided to have the initiative and have and create surveys about the status quo in the public spaces, and we do love how young people are engaged. And what else? We also talk about the situation of water and how water for baby food can be not safe in some places, and how in our world we live in with so many different realities. Thank you so much, and maybe the next facilitator can continue.
Thank you, Mario. It was a fantastic report. I'm glad to hear that was discussed in your room. I'll turn it over to Hannah now, if you'd like to share some of your takeaways.
Hi everyone. It's such an honor to be here with you all today. In our small group, we discussed the interconnectedness between developing and developed countries in the achievement of the SDGs. We discussed how there were many similar themes presented by the panelists, and how we can only achieve the SDGs by multilateralism and collaboration from youth. We also had someone mentioned that despite all, hope is really important, and it's important to be hopeful in times like this. And also, youth resilience is also very important. And it's very important that we include youth in these discussions. But of course, hold hope, especially in trying times today. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I have to say that, and as Katie's putting in the chat, hope and resilience, those are the two words that have stuck out to me today. Since Vitalina mentioned it in her presentation, the resilience of youth, and we had a similar conversation in our breakout room, that the emphasis on doing something, taking action, and having that passion, is hopeful for all of us. So I'm glad that's a takeaway from your breakout room. Um, I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Veronica, would you like to share takeaways from your breakout room?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. One point that really resonated with our group, the first point that was actually brought up, the reality of daily commuting and challenges in the Philippines, which demonstrated how transportation and urban infrastructure directly affect people's quality of life and the importance of creating a more sustainable and accessible communities. Another key takeaway that was brought up was the issue of climate change, and some of our participants reflected on the fact that marginalized communities often contribute the least to climate change, yet they experience some of its most severe impacts. And this definitely reinforced the needs for equity, the inclusion to remain at the center for sustainable development efforts. A third thing, our group also emphasized that achieving the Sustainable Development Goals requires stronger collaborations between governments, the civil society, and local communities. Partnerships are most effective when they are built on trust, shared responsibility, and actual participation. And finally, we just kind of reflected on the fact that youth voices are very, very important. They deserve to be heard, valued, and included in decision making. Meaningful progress on the SDGs, it requires our voices and to be recognized as equal partners to shape sustainable solutions.
Great, that was a fantastic summary. All those points are so important to keep in mind. Maybe just one more real quick. Eugenia, would you like to go? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. In my group, we mainly talked about one thing, which was just the willingness of governments and like societies to have these goals. So everyone was talking about how great all of the presentations were and how the youth having to like speak up and have all of the solutions, it's so great. But some of the struggles that the people presenting already pose. So like the economic struggles in different countries that might have a lot of resources, but they use them like differently or they sell them out or things like that. So we talked about that and governments somehow how they instead of keeping like these long-term goals in mind, depending on the political party, they kind of like change around what they're going to do. So a government comes in and does some things, but then in 4 years, when the government changes, those things are actually removed, and how these projects needs to have longevity. So how these projects need to be thought out in the long term, and how youth coming up with all of these solutions is great for that to have that yeah, to have longevity on these projects.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the facilitators for taking the time today. And thank you all for sticking around and engaging in these conversations. It shows that we really need this concrete intergenerational cooperation to make the achievement of the SDGs a reality. In the last couple minutes, I would now like to invite Ruby an intern with IBVM Loreto, joining us from Nepal to offer some closing reflections.
Thank you, Charlotte. So we have arrived at the close of what I believe has been a truly remarkable side event. We came together today from across the world, from Philippines and Ukraine, from India and Spain, from Nepal and Australia, and everywhere in between. And we discussed that too really happens in global policy spaces. We listen to young people, not about young people, not on behalf of young people. We listen to young people in their own words with their own authority. This is the state of our world. 4 years from 2030, uneven progress. Most goals are not on track to be achieved. There is a real urgency and extraordinary young people rising to meet it. So as we close, I want to speak directly to every policymaker, every UN representative, every civil society leader, and every institutional partner in this space today. This is our call to action. Invest in young people, not as a line item, but as a strategy. Fund youth-led organization working at the communities level on SDGs 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. Remove the barriers, financial, bureaucratic, and political, that prevents young people from leading the solutions their own community needs. Include us meaningfully, not symbolically. Seats at the table are not enough if young people are not shaping the agenda, co-authoring the policies, and holding institutions accountable for the implementation. Meaningful youth participation must become the standard, not the exception. Trust our expertise and our vision. The young leaders you heard from today are not the future of this work, they are the present. They bring lived experience, technical knowledge, and community credibility that no consultant report can replicate. Listen to them, resource them, partner with them. And to every young person who participated today, as a panelist, as a breakout conversation contributor, as an attendee, don't leave this space and wait for permission to act. You already have everything you need. Take the connections you made today, take the ideas you had, and carry them back to your communities, your organization, and your advocacy. The 2030 agenda will not be achieved without us, but with us, truly, with us, it can be. Thank you. Before we close, I want to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who made today possible, to our generous event sponsor, the Institute of Blessed Virgin Mary, Laureate Generalate, the Maryknoll Sister of St. Dominic, the Grail, the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of Good Shepherd, the Daughter of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, the Dominican Leadership Conference, and the Justice Coalition of Religious. Thank you. Your commitment to youth voices and to SDGs made this platform possible. To our wonderful event partners, the JPIC office in Spain and the Mary Ward Center in Toronto, thank you for your collaboration, your support, and your belief in this work. To our youth panelists, thank you. You showed up with courage, with clarity, and with an unshakable commitment to your communities. You are the heart of this event, and we are grateful beyond words. To our host and moderators who welcomed us so warmly, and to every facilitator who guided our breakout conversation, thank you for creating a space that was safe, substantive, and truly youth-led. And finally, to every single attendee who joined us today, whether from United Nations headquarters in New York or somewhere across the globe, thank you for your time, your engagement, and your presence. You made this dialogue real. We hope to see you continue this work in your own spaces, in your own communities, and here again as we march together towards 2030 with hope, with energy, and with everything we have got. Let's go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruby. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining. And special shout out to our tech crew behind the scenes and to our Spanish interpreter. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you so much, girl. Thank you. Such a beautiful event.